So as I've said to you, my sermon series is based on Braiding Sweetgrass, indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and the teaching of plants, which sounds really, really dry, actually, kind of. And I wasn't sure how I felt about reading it, but I have become so enthralled with it that I'm sharing much of it with you. She wrote another book on mosses, like a whole book on mosses, really. But if it's anything close to this, I'm going to have to get it and read it. So this is my excerpt for today. Yahweh, Y-A-W-E. It's a Potawatomi word. The animate to be. I am, you are, he or she is. To speak of those possessed with life and spirit, we must say Yahweh. By what linguistic confluence do Yahweh of the Old Testament and Yahweh of the New World both fall from the mouths of the reverent? Isn't this just what it means? To be, to have the breath of life within, to be the offspring of creation. The language reminds us, in every sentence, of our kinship with all of the animate world. Gosh, I'm so used to reading after that. I'm so confused. I'm going to start ready to preach now. Okay. Would you pray with me? Because clearly I need it a lot. Oh, help. And bother, as people would say. Divine One. In our silence is our connection to you and to all things. May we learn, may we grow closer to one another. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of each of our hearts be filled with your insight and your wisdom. Amen. So the creation story at the beginning of Genesis was written in the 6th century BCE, before the Common Era, during the Babylonian exile, actually. If you know anything about the Babylonian exile, you know that the Babylonians came into Jerusalem and they destroyed pretty much everything. They destroyed the temple, they destroyed homes, they killed a whole lot of people, and then they took the best people with them back to Babylon. They took the doctors and the artisans and the scientists and anybody who could be of use to them. They took away from their homeland and kept them there. And so being away from Jerusalem and not only dealing with the grief and the horror of everything that had happened, also meant for them that they weren't quite sure what happened to their connection with God, because back in the day, God lived in the temple, right? So what does it mean if the temple's destroyed and now we're living in Babylon? Are we still connected to God? Are we still close to God? And so this creation story comes out of that situation where people wanted to expand their understanding of their connectedness to God. And so they created this liturgical myth to evoke reverence. The reverence of nature, of all of creation, to say, God created all of it. The fish and the sky and the stars and the trees and the plants, God created all of it, and therefore God's in all of it, which means that God isn't just in the temple in Jerusalem, God's here with us now. And we're not so alone. That was part of the intent of their myth. But perhaps the intent for us is the same, to remind us that all of creation is part of this divine interconnectedness. And to not forget that, to not forget that we're one with instead of apart from. So often we see the world as an object, something to be used, something to be... Sadly, we take advantage of it too often. but something for our use instead of something to look at. You know, you did your sightseeing, Amanda and Carlin, you're like, oh, cool, we get to look at all this. But it's looking at it from a distance instead of recognizing that we're in this together. The other piece of that creation story that strikes me is the use of words and how powerful words are and how important words are. You know, it's God spoke and all of these things came into existence. The word is a creative piece. And so we have to remember that when we speak words, we create something. We create relationships or not, based on the words we use. So if we're talking about people and things, we can either accept or reject, we can like or not like, we can respect or not respect, we can include or exclude, we can care for or not care for, depending on our language. So Robin Wall Kimmerer is an environmental biologist who usually takes her students out into the field, right? Points out all of the different plants and their Latin names. They're really big, long Latin names. And they all scribble them down in their notebook, and then they set about memorizing them as dutiful students will do. I thought it'd be fun just to look up some of these names. I'm like, really? What are the Latin names for some of the common animals and plants that we have around? So I thought I'd let you guess. Okay? Let's see if you can guess what these names are for. Some of you should really know this one. Canis, Lupus, Familiaris.
Dog.
Wow, you're good.
Oh.
You can go on like Jeopardy or something. That's a dog. How about Gallus domesticus? Gallus domesticus. Chase, you have some of these at home? Do you know what it is? No?
Chicken.
Chicken, it's a hen. Yep. How about an equus caballus?
Horse.
Good. Ratus.
Bunny.
Ratus.
Red.
It's a rat. It's a black rat, to be specific. How about a Felis catus? There you go. You got that one. Panthera leo.
Lion.
A lion. Good. Ovis aries.
Fire.
Ovis aries. It's a sheep. It's a sheep. And this, we could play this game all day, but this was the weirdest name, supposedly, in the animal kingdom. Wunderpus photogenicus. What did you say? Not quite a platypus, but it's got the us at the end of it. It's got 8 arms. It's an octopus. A Wunderpus photogenicus. Did you say that, Chase?
Yes.
Okay, good for you. Chase gets a gold star. Okay, so Chase, when you come home from school one day this week, I want you to say this for your snack. Mom, I want a Malus domestica. A Malus domestica. It's an apple. Or a Musa paradisiaca. Cheese pizza. Yes, I know they didn't grow on plants. It's a half-circle yellow thing. A banana. Or maybe you'll dip this in some dip, some Docus carota. Carrots. And then you get these at McDonald's. Well, Solanum tuberosum. It's a potato. I kind of feel like I'm doing incantations from Harry Potter, though. Saying some of these things, which is probably where she got her words. So, do any of these words give you like a warm, fuzzy feeling? No, not really. Because scientific words are, they're language for observing. They're a language for distance. They keep us at arm's length. They're great for, classifying things with parts and for species. But as far as describing the world that we live in, and speaking about the world we live in, it has an inherent lack that Robin Wall Kimmerer lifts up. She says she didn't realize that there was this lack, probably because she's a scientist. She likes all those big words and has a passion for it. But she was reading a book on the many uses of fungi. Just a little light read before bedtime, I'm sure. And it was written by an Anishinaabe ethnobotologist, but not one of those people. Anyways, and she came across a new word that was a native word, and it was called pushpoi. Pupoi, I think it's pupoi. But it means the force that pushes the mushroom up out of the ground at night. The pupoi, the mushroom that pushes the force that pushes the mushroom up from the ground at night. She's like, how cool is that? There is no word in English, there is no scientific word to talk about that mysterious force that pushes the mushroom up from the ground. And she says, because, science has the proclivity to explain, what's known, instead of that which is mysterious or beyond our grasp. So that was like the tip of the iceberg for this whole new language that made her look at the world differently. And we all probably know that when white people came to this land, that they set about assimilating the natives, right? They took away their culture, their homes, their kids, their dress, their language, their livelihood, their hunting. And maybe we might think that, while taking away their language, okay, so they've got the English language. But it was more than that. It took away so much more than that. It took away a way of looking at the world. And she said she went to a Potawatomi annual gathering. And one of the big things about this gathering that year was that they were going to start teaching people the native language of Potawatomi again. And so they had all of the fluent Potawatomi speakers in the world who came to be at that gathering to be teachers. You want to guess how many there were? A few more than 3. There were 9. 9 fluent Potawatomi speakers in the whole world, most of whom walked in with canes or walkers or, wheelchair. And as she started to learn the new words for things in Potawatomi, she discovered it wasn't just about, trading out an English word for a Potawatomi word. It was about learning a whole new relationship with the world. Because in Potawatomi, there are all kinds of things that are animate that in our language are not animate. So she says this, that the language is a mirror for the animacy of the world, the life that pulses through all things. So not only are plants and animals animate, but all kinds of things that we never consider to be animate, like rocks and trees and mountains and water and even objects, their drums and their songs and their stories, their sacred medicine, all of them are animate. They're all living beings imbued with the spirit that flows through all things. And then she came to verbs, and come to find out that verbs aren't just limited to movement. That when all of the world is animate, a Saturday and a color and a hill and a bay are all verbs. This is how she described a bay. I just couldn't say it as beautifully as she did. So to be a bay holds the wonder that for this moment, the living water has decided to shelter itself between these shores, conversing with cedar roots and a flock of baby mergansers, because it could do otherwise, become a stream or an ocean or a waterfall, and there are verbs for that, too. So she makes the point that we would never refer to another family member as an it. Right, Marilyn, you would never say of Scott, well, it's cooking in the kitchen. And I would never say of Julie, well, it's playing the guitar. Because when we do that, what we take away their humanity, it's derogatory, it's disrespectful, it takes away their selfhood. And so in most native languages, all of the plants and rocks and animals and so many things are animate because they're part of the family. And you would never be disrespectful to a part of your family. It's a powerful change in consciousness to begin to look at all of these things as being animate beings. We're so conditioned to be at arm's length, and our language makes so many things its. Just think about how we get our food. You know, maybe some of us have gardens, but for the most part, certainly in the winter, we're going to the grocery store. And we have the luxury of going into the produce section and picking our vegetables off the shelf, already cleaned and bug-free, all of that good stuff. Or we can get it frozen, or we can get it in a can. We don't know the farmer. We don't know how the ground was. We don't know how the season was. We didn't plant the seeds. We didn't nourish the harvest. We didn't pick the crop. We just poof, have it. We don't even think about all of those steps that had to take place to come to us, to nourish us. And animals, you know, we didn't help them to be born. We didn't feed them and take care of them and give them, you know, I have a sheep farmer friend who, you know, they have to make sure they're healthy and give them vaccinations and help them breed and all that kind of stuff and help 300 babies be born, and we don't do that. We don't have to take care of them and then send them off to slaughter, much less slaughter and butcher them ourselves. We get to go to the grocery store and get something on a little styrofoam plate wrapped in plastic. Now, don't get me wrong, I prefer it that way. But we lose the connection, right? We forget to be grateful for how this earth and our family, if we look at it that way, sustains our very lives. You know, we've got a vegetable garden, and I tend my plants carefully and gently, and I plant them, and I feed them, I water them, and I'm happy and excited to see them grow, and I'm sad when they fail, and I sing to them when I'm weeding, as long as there's nobody else around, and all of that good stuff, but I can't say that I've ever, when I've gone to take the beans off the plants, said thank you to the plants. And I will this year, because in that different way of looking at things, they're my family. They're providing for me. And in fact, in a native tradition, you would ask permission to harvest. And then you would give thanks, and you might leave some tobacco behind in Thanksgiving. To be cognizant of that connection and to care for the earth and all things in a different way. You know, Robin Kimmerer was saying that she had her students out in the field one year, and she was trying to teach them about the plants being family. And one of her students, a young man named Andy, stopped her and he said, okay, now wait a minute. Are you saying that when we speak in English, and when we think in English, that we've actually been given permission to disrespect nature? That we're denying personhood to everything? He said, wouldn't it be different if nothing wasn't it? And she said, well, basically the arrogance of the English language is that humans are the only ones who are honored with being animate and being beings worthy of being cared for. Now, we might extend that to our pets and maybe some animals, but that pretty much limits where our language lets us go. Now, there may be some of us here who have named inanimate objects. Have any of you named inanimate objects? What have you named?
Cars.
What did you name your car?
Sylvia.
Sylvia. Jim's car was Sylvia. Anybody else name their car?
My motorcycle
Your motorcycle was
is Mabel.
is Mabel. Rex? Shirley May? Pearly May. Is that your new car? Pearly May is Rox's new car. Beth?
My Honda is Rhonda.
Her Honda is Rhonda. But, you know, or we name our, as kids, maybe we name our stuffed animals, or we name some, anybody name anything else? Dolls.
My trumpet.
Your trumpet, what's your trumpet name?
Silent Sam.
Silent Sam. That's kind of ironic, isn't it?
Yeah,
You just made that up. Your trumpet is now hurt by your dismissal. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Shirley has a stuffed monkey named Bananas. And why do we name inanimate objects? Because we love them?
personalized.
It personalized them. No, we're not crazy, Sharon. She's doing this, right? It's because we have a connection with them, and we want the personal touch. We want the intimacy with those objects. This is asking us to do so much more than our cars and our motorcycles and our dolls and our stuffed animals or whatever. I mean, what would happen if we named the trees in our yard and the flowers in our yards? I was walking through our neighborhood a couple weeks ago, a month ago, and there's one house that I passed that has this gorgeous maple. You know, its branches just sprawl like 30 feet in each direction, not horribly high, but just this gorgeous tree. And I walked by one day and they were cutting it down. It was a perfectly healthy tree, and they were just about done, and the woman who'd just been helping cut it down was sweeping up the driveway, and I walked up and I said, was there something wrong with the tree? Why did they cut it down? And she said, well, the couple's lived here for 34 years, and they said they loved the tree, but it was just too messy. And my heart breaks. I mean, when that tree is an it, it's not so hard to take a chainsaw to it. But if the tree is grandmother maple, how do you take a chainsaw to grandmother maple? And if you think of the fact that that mess that grandmother maple is making is just her way of sending her seeds out into the world to grow into children. It's a whole other way of looking at it. And then maybe we put up with the mess a little bit, because grandmother maple is there to help put oxygen back into the air and shelter us with her leaves and the animals with her branches. The paragraph I used out of her book has this amazing synchronicity between the Potawatomi word Yahweh, Y-A-W-E, and one of our Old Testament names for God, Yahweh, Y-A-H-W-E-H. A whole half a world away, and yet both of those worlds really mean being. The Yahweh in Potawatomi is to be. He is, she is, they are. And Yahweh in our scripture is beingness itself. So we are beings interconnected with other beings through beingness itself. And that's where our language falls short, because it forgets to remind us of that. And I think we lose a great deal when we forget. So we're not all going to go out and learn Potawatomi, but we can start to change our thinking about the natural world around us. To remember that we have a kinship with it, that it's family. Amen.